Okay, there we go. Okay. Let's get on over to Rockfin. Let's see if they're ready. Cue these little guys up. Rockfin. Okay, there you are. Let's get to it, man.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And I want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat. Happy Tuesday, folks. Let's get into it. Shout out to Jamie N says hello. Hello, Jamie. What's going on? What's going on, Bad Cookies? 2 words for you. Technological singularity. Oh, we have some interesting stories tonight. I think you guys are going to dig it. I think you're going to like it. What's going on? Norman says 3 words, those who can count and those who cannot. Shout out to Kill Your Egrorgies. Egrogeries? I don't know. Anyone ever read I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream novella? Disturbingly violent. Oh, sorry. Put in my own word there. Disturbingly terrifying. Read regarding transhumanism written in 1967 by Harlan Anderson. Probably the most effed up story next to Job. We're going to get into that tonight because I really want to hear where you guys stand on this. Shout out to Miguel says peace. Greetings, Robert says 3 words. Resistance is futile. What's going on? Hannah G says hi, Sabby. Greetings, Lawrence Johnson, who's a Sabby member, says doobie doobie door 2024. Shout out to Allie says transhumanism is a fancy new word to describe eugenics. Shout out to Kim. Hello, Sabby Sabs. Happy Tuesday. What's going on, gamers? Says hello. Greetings, Sun Moon. Hello, everybody. Shout out to Monique in London. Hey, Sabby and everyone. What's going on? Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, I'm not sure about transhumanism, but I do want a robot to come and clean my house. That would be great for all of us, right? Could you imagine if we had a robot like the Jetsons had? The Jetsons, for those of you who don't know, I don't know everyone's age group, but the Jetsons was a cartoon that I used to watch as a kid, and it was set in the future. And they had a robot maid and a robot butler that would just clean the house. It was kind of cool, actually. Shout out to Casey showing solidarity and fire there. Greetings, crazy boy. Hey, y'all. Shout out to Ashura. What the? I was waiting for someone to say this. I'm going to explain it tonight. I was like, somebody in this comment is going to say, what is it? We'll get into it, Ashura. Shout out to Sebastian says, happy Tuesday, y'all. Greetings, Terry. Hello, fam. What's going on? Dominino says hello or hey, y'all. Peace. Shout out to Rodrigo. Sabby's hair looking bright. Yeah, I got I had to touch up my highlights. I was actually supposed to do that 3 months ago. I told you I'm not good with this stuff. I'm not good with it. Shout out to Joe says, I wonder what Sabby is going to say about my daughter, Tulsi. Oh my God. Should be a fun show tonight. Should be a fun show. What's going on? Lewis says, on for as long as possible. Welcome. Brandy says, hello, everyone. Greetings, Bart. That should be an option for the poll. What the F is transhumanism? That's my vote. Yeah, if you're not sure, wait till after I explain it and then, answer the poll, because we'll do the poll like after that segment. Shout out to You Don't Like My Music, Smash the Right. What's going on, Silver Surfer? Happy Taco Tuesday, Sabby. Kick ass on the hill tomorrow. Okay, Silver. I don't know how you knew. How did you know that? I was going to announce that at the end of the show. Wait, seriously, no. How did you know that? I haven't told anyone. Huh. Okay. Now I'm curious. I'm really curious about this Silver Surfer. Is this some kind of Fantastic Four vibe going on? Is that what happened? Eric just told me. Eric didn't say anything. I don't know how you know. Huh. Okay. So, shout out to Linnea Cannon. You all need to watch today's AM Wake Up with Whitney Webb. She talked about this. It's scary what the parasites have in store. Yes. So if you guys are not familiar, if you follow Convo Couch, Pasta from Convo Couch is a part of a new show called AM Wake Up. And also Steve from Slow News Day. Both of them are part of MCSC Network. They have a show now called AM Wake Up. It's actually really, really good. I highly recommend that you follow them. They're on Rockfin also. And they've had people like Whitney Webb come on, like talking about, they're having like these deep, deep discussions. So definitely check that show out. I really do like it. That's probably one of my faves right now. One of my favorite new shows. Whoopsie, sliding. What's going on? Nina says, Sabby kills. Oh, I hope not. Shout out to Steve, Danger, Will Robertson. What's going on? See the change. Hey there, lovely revolutionaries. Hey, Sabby, so good to see your bright face. Thank you so much. Good to see you too. Shout out to Where Pilgrim says, Dr. Doom got the info. LOL. I really don't know. I'm looking to see if Silver Surfer said cosmic awareness, Sabby, peace. LOL. Actually, Robbie spilled it today. I did not know. I had no idea. Yeah, it's been a very busy day for me today. I have to do something better about scheduling. I have to get better at this because I'm not good at it. And this is why I told you guys, I look, we need assistance. We need people to kind of help, not necessarily on the back end, at least not on my show, because Eric produces on my show, but just RBN in general. I think it would be great if we had some assistance, some people that can help us with things like scheduling, or we could use producers over at RBN. CJ has mentioned that a couple times on stream, but yeah, my calendar is all over the place. And I caught myself today and realized I had double booked myself again, because we don't just, do this. Like I also have other meetings for other like groups. Like there's a housing group here that I meet with. So there's a lot going on, but people will tell you if people who have been in contact with me will tell you that I'm all over the place. I'm all over the place. Ask people how many times I had to reschedule. Oh man. Anywho, shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Let's go ahead and get you guys up here on the screen. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker there. And I do want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Let's give a big whoop whoop for Sylvia Ross. She's a newbie. Shout out to Sylvia. Thank you so much for your support, guys. I really do appreciate it here. So let's go ahead and get into tonight's first story. Let me share my thumbnail first. I told you I'm all over the place today. All over the place. I'm all over. All right. Tonight, we have 4 stories. Tonight, we're going to discuss Sam Seder and Tulsi Gabbard IRS. Interesting discussion there. You guys know how I feel about the alphabet letter groups, but we're going to get into that tonight because I actually found myself disagreeing with both of them on different areas that they discuss here about the IRS. We'll get into that. I'm also going to discuss Joe Rogan. He gets deep and he's talking about transhumanism. That's that big topic on the poll that we're going to get into tonight. And I want to hear your feedback about that. We're also going to discuss Kamala Harris defends Biden. Surprise, surprise. She had another interview. And we're going to discuss the nurses' strike. If you are a nurse, if you work in healthcare, this segment is for you. And we're actually going to go ahead and get started with that story. I was absolutely, I would say, super happy when I saw this because I said, this is exactly what needs to happen. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. People have been taking healthcare workers for granted, especially during the pandemic. I have friends that are nurses. I have a friend who is a primary care provider who also works in the hospital. It's crazy. They got to work in 2 different places. I know people who are, doctors. I know people who are nurse practitioners, which has become more of a bigger field in the past couple of years. More people are getting their NP instead of going for the full medical doctor role. And nurse practitioners can also write prescriptions as well, too. So that's that. But I have a soft spot for people who work in healthcare. I always have. I've worked in healthcare many, many years ago. It can be very stressful. And I think they're not appreciated. And I'm talking about all of it. The nurses, I would say a lot of the physicians, especially the ones working in the hospitals, the nurses, that includes your medical techs. That includes, I don't know the names of all the positions, but the people that take your blood pressure when you come in, like those people, medical assistants, all of them, they're just not appreciated. But in particular, nurses, I think, have experienced a lot of, how do I put it, disrespect during the pandemic. And I've heard so many stories. And these stories did not start during the pandemic. It was a couple of years ago. I had friends or people that I knew that worked at a hospital here in Boston called Brigham and Women's. It's one of the best hospitals that we have here. I think Mass General is number 1 here in Massachusetts. And it was number 1 in the United States about a year ago. Not sure if it still is now. Johns Hopkins, they're kind of neck and neck. But one of the stories that I have heard about Brigham and Women's is that they don't have a psych ward. So what would happen is you would have patients that would come into Brigham and Women's. And if it was a patient that had any type of mental health issue, the nurses had to find ways to take care of those patients. And they're not trained to do that. This is why it's important to have a psych ward. So like every year, nurses at Brigham Women's would go on strike. That because of that reason that I just told you, because of pay, because of hours worked, working them overtime. You know, this idea that nurses are only supposed to work like these 3-day or 4-day shifts where they're working 12 hours each day. So if you work 4 days a week and you work 12 hours each day, and then you'll have 3 days off, right? Okay. From what I've heard from people, that's not necessarily really happening. And especially during the pandemic, people are working longer hours and people are quitting and people are leaving the nursing profession and people are leaving the teaching profession. But it didn't start with the pandemic. I want to be very clear about that. This was already an issue and the pandemic made it worse. So to my I would say non-surprise. I was not surprised when I saw this earlier yesterday. Massive healthcare strike. 15,000 Minnesota nurses walk off the job. They said, take this job and shove it. I'm out of here. Let's get into that. About 15,000 nurses in Minnesota went on strike Monday morning, saying they are fighting for better staffing and better care for their patients. The strike is against 13 hospitals in Minneapolis, St. Paul market. Shout out to anyone in the chat who's in that area, as well as Duluth. It is scheduled to last only 3 days, and the union says the strike is not about pay, but over letting members provide the quality of care they want to provide for their patients. Now, this is something you may not have seen. When we talk about a lot of the other strikes, it's usually about pay, it's about benefits. This is actually about quality care. We are not on strike for our wages. We're fighting for the ability to have some say over our profession and the work-life balance. Here it comes. Don't you just love that phrase, work-life balance? Every company that I've worked for, what do they tell us during orientation? We honor work-life balance. You will have work-life balance here. Not really. I've never seen it. No matter where I've worked, there is no work-life balance. That's just something they say to get you in and to try to keep you there. But if you have work-life balance, you really don't have to advertise that. You're doing what you should be doing to begin with. So if they heavily push that and advertise that, be careful of that. The union said it has negotiated with hospital executives for more than 5 months, and its members have worked without contracts for the last several months. Although Turner said the two sides have been moving closer to one another on wages, they are still far apart on economic terms and have made no progress on the union's demands to solve short staffing, retention, and better patient care. So if you are short-staffed in the hospitals, that's going to affect patient care. If you don't have enough nurses there, that is going to affect patient care. So if you ever go to the ER and you're sitting in that emergency room for hours on end and you're wondering why they haven't called you back yet, it could be that they are short-staffed. So yes, that is a problem. Spokesperson for management at the various hospitals cannot afford to meet the nurses' demands, and that they are doing what is needed to provide patients with uninterrupted care during the strike. Okay, what kind of care though? Alina Health is focused on delivering safe, high-quality care throughout the duration of the Minnesota Nurses Association 3-day strike. But if they are focused on delivering high-quality care, they wouldn't have been short-staffed, because if you're short-staffed, the patients are not getting high-quality care. Just keeping it real. Again, if you're in Minnesota, shout out in the chat. It isn't okay. Some of the nurses on the picket lines also said they didn't want to be on strike, but they felt that management's position left them no choice. It hasn't been good. A nurse at the United Hospital in St. Paul, that's coming from, her name is Brandy Navarro. She said she joined the picket line Monday after working the Sunday night shift. To feel valued, it isn't okay. To not feel valued, it isn't okay. And people just don't know how not okay things are. We are standing up for our patients and standing up for each other. There are no talks scheduled for the two sides during the next 3 days. That's according to a spokesperson from the Twin Cities Hospital Group. Our focus is on our patients at this time. I can't, guys. I can't. Okay. Our hospitals will be staffed with experienced nurses, nurse managers, and leaders, trained replacement nurses, and some existing traveler nurses. Let me talk about that for just a second. A friend of mine is a travel nurse. What that means is she picks up different assignments across the country, and she'll fill in at hospitals where they're lacking. They may be short-staffed or they need more people to assist with the crisis. When there was the fires in California last year, she went to go work in California because they needed more people, even though they weren't necessarily short-staffed. Because there was that crisis, they needed more people. And I was looking at her pictures on Facebook the other day, and I could have sworn she was in Minnesota. So I hope she didn't go and fill in for this particular situation here. But what I would say to people, when nurses are on strike, please don't cross that line. And I say that because they deserve to be treated with respect. They deserve to get better treatment at these hospitals. And for them to go on strike and just walk out like that, that is a huge deal. So I know they're reaching out to other nurses, trying to get them to come in and fill those spots. But when you do that, you're actually hurting the movement that the nurses who are on strike are trying to fulfill. They're trying to make the care better for the patients, and they're trying to get better benefits for the nurses who are already there. Don't cross the picket line. Don't do it. I don't care if they offer you more money. Just don't. You're not helping the current situation. That's my message about that. Now, let's go back in here. People may experience longer wait times for services while care teams triage patients. We ask everyone for their patience. The strike is just the latest example of a growing trend of unions going on strike or threatening to go on strike over work conditions rather than strictly over wage and benefit questions. That is important. The conditions. It's not all just about wages. Unions representing about 57,000 workers who make up train crews at the nation's freight railroads are threatening to go on strike as of Friday in what could be the first national rail strike in 30 years. Guys, this could be huge. When I was talking about general strike, when we talked about general strike over at RBN and we had the summit last year, what did we come to the conclusion? In order for this to be successful, you have to shut down transportation. You have to shut down the ports. So if the rail workers go on strike this Friday, and I'm going to be following the story, if they go on strike this Friday, that is going to be huge. Press Secretary for Joe Biden has already commented on it, by the way. She's already said, we're trying to find ways to get goods and products to move throughout the country in the event this happens. They're freaking out. Because how do you replace that? You see, a lot of people picked on us last year when we did that general strike summit. But do you see what is happening now? It was only inevitable. And this is happening under a Democrat president, by the way. So let's keep our eye on that. Keep our eye on the prize. So, and it goes on to talk about the teachers going on strike as well. It's happening all across the country, guys. So many people are just fed up. People are tired. And this is not something that's being fixed by a Republican president or a Democrat president. We need to look towards the workers. We need to look towards people who are not able to work as well, people who are disabled and cannot work. We need to look towards people who are struggling through poverty in this country. These are the people who are being hit the hardest right now through inflation, through pandemic, through all of it. When the economy has a downturn, these are the groups that are the most affected. And I think it's important to remember that. Now, I do have a video clip here that I do want to show you in reference to the nursing strike. Again, now this is from CNN. Let's hear what they had to say.
Nurses in Minnesota launching a 3-day strike.
Roughly 15,000 nurses are off the job today. They say they're fighting for better staffing and better care for their patients. Now, the strike is against 13 hospitals. It's one of the largest private nursing strikes in U.S. history. CNN's Adrian Broadus is covering this for us from St. Paul. So what are you seeing and hearing there?
Victor, good afternoon to you. Throughout the day, we've seen ambulances enter and exit this hospital, Children's Minnesota in St. Paul. while they were entering and exiting, hundreds of nurses were on the picket line here. The nurses we spoke to say they have two major concerns. They want better staffing, increased security measures, as well as increased wages. There was one nurse who stood out. Her name was Brandy Navarro. She wore a red tutu and a red cape. She said that was her reminder that nurses, many of the 15,000 who are striking, were told, during the pandemic that they were superheroes. I asked her what is the biggest challenge she faced during the pandemic and now inside of the hospital. Here's what she said.
It just hasn't been good. To not feel valued it's not okay. And people just don't know how not okay things are. So we just standing up for our patients and standing up for each other.
We're starting with new people being trained in, who've been trained in. We should expect some delays at our hospitals. We should expect some hiccups because that's just the nature of the business on any day.
I want you to pay attention to something that he just said about the staffing issue. He's revealing himself here.
So we just standing up for our patients and standing up for each other.
We're starting with new people being trained in, who've been trained in. We should expect some delays at our hospitals. We should expect some hiccups because that's just the nature of the business on any day.
It's just the nature of the business. And that's what it really is at the end of the day. It's a business to them. The healthcare industry in this country is a business. It's not really about healing people. It's not really about curing people. It's a business. And this is the nature of it. So he's letting you know that they're used to this. They are used to nurses going on strike. They're like, yeah, it's the nature of the business. We'll just call other nurses and get them to fill in. This is why I tell you, Republican, Democrat, president, whatever, they're not fixing this problem. They're not fixing the problem with these corporations, the way that they are exploiting the workers. They're not fixing that problem. Does everyone hear that? When people come to me and they tell me that it's ridiculous to say go against the two-party system, well, what are we supposed to do? Nothing. Did you hear what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if you have a Republican president or a Democrat president. When it comes to these worker issues, when it comes to worker rights, they are not fixing that. Didn't we already have a labor movement in this country before over these same issues?
And the last person you heard from is a spokesperson with the Twin Cities Hospital Group. He said, expect some hiccups. That's because temporary nurses are filling the gaps as these nurses behind us and across the state strike. Keep in mind, these are licensed nurses, but they don't know the system here in Minnesota. It's almost like having a substitute teacher in the classroom. So
Hold up. One more time for the people in the back. They're licensed nurses, but always come after
hiccups.
That.
That's because temporary nurses are filling the gaps as these nurses behind us and across the state strike. Keep in mind, these are licensed nurses, but they don't know the system here in Minnesota. It's almost like having a substitute teacher in the classroom. So the hospital.
Let me tell you what that means. So here's a news flash for those who are not aware. You would think that hospitals would operate off of the same systems, but they don't. They really don't. That's why anytime you go to a different hospital, you have to give them the same information about yourself. You have to fill out those forms again, because hospitals don't share patient information with each other. They don't have the same systems. So those nurses that are coming in, they're going to have to learn the system that they have at the hospitals in Minnesota first before they can help any of the patients. first. Remember, this strike is only 3 days. Just keep that in mind. So she compared them to a substitute teacher. And it's not just healthcare. This is also in higher education. I've worked at different colleges. Guess what? They also don't use the same systems. The software systems that I used at MIT, we did not use those systems at Boston University. Surprise. So here come the substitute nurses that have to take the time to learn the new system and then care for the patients, which are already going to be backlogged because of the short staffing. Good luck with that one. Good luck.
Hospital leaders are asking the patients to pack some patience. Victor?
That was powerful to hear from that nurse. We need to value our nurses. They need to feel their worth. Yeah. They're so important to all of our families. Adrian Broadus, thank you very much.
We need to value all workers. She's right. We need to value the nurses, but we need to value all workers in this country, which we don't. Someone was asking me a question here about the systems, and I think I lost it. But someone was asking, what kind of systems do they use? So typically, I can tell you how it worked in the university system. Typically, what would happen is you would have different software companies, and they would basically try to sell their product to the university to get the university to use their software. I imagine it's probably similar for hospitals as well, right? So whichever one that the hospital or the university decides to buy, to go on board with, that's what they have. Vendors. That's right, Danny. That's kind of how, at least that's how it works in the university system. That's why if you go work at different universities, you'll notice they don't necessarily use the same systems. So you kind of have to learn all over again. But kudos to those nurses. Keep keeping on. Fight. They say fight for your right to party. Fight for your right to be treated well. I know that doesn't rhyme, but here we go. Thank you for the super chat, Ashura. Anyone want to be a cyborg, smoke sector, or Cyrax? I'm assuming this is for Halloween, Ashura. Lady Alex says, isn't Data from Star Trek transhuman? Possibly. We're going to get into that. Let's hold that for that discussion. Shout out to JB, who's RB and Comrade says, hello all, happy Tuesday. Lady Alex, I was fired as a nurse for trying to unionize my workplace. The nurses here in Worcester, Massachusetts were on strike last year for 10 months before they got what they were fighting for. So that's where mutual aid will come in. Susan says, nurses have been striking across Europe and Australia over patient care. That's good to know. Bad cookies, Sabby, their version of work-life balance is if you live at work, then you are living life. Perfect capitalist balance. Yes. That reminds me of companies like Google and Facebook where they have like a gym there for the employees. You can do your laundry there. They have childcare services. Everything that you would have at home, they already have it there at work, but that's to keep you there working. Aspen Fallen. Yep, all software platforms are like that in all industries. And JB, this is why we need a nationalized healthcare system. The system would be used nationwide, so no difference in systems from hospital to hospital, no new questions or very little new questions. That's important. This would change that, right? This would definitely change that. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Okay, Miss Boston, Massachusetts, your state has now completed all the initiatives that will go on the ballot. And here they are. Question 1, referred by Massachusetts legislator A. Yes, vote support amending the state constitution to create an additional tax of 4% for income over 1 million. in addition to the existing 5% flat rate income tax and dedicated revenue to education and transportation purposes. Question 2, medical loss ratios for dental insurance plans initiative. A yes vote supports establishing a medical loss ratio for dental plans at 83% and requiring the insurer to refund the excess premium to its covered individuals and covered groups. In other words, for every dollar spent on dental insurance, 83% must go towards care, 17% to running company. If it falls below 83%, above 17%, you get reimbursed. Thank you for this tip, Jacob. Jason Burmis covers the transhumanist topic very well. Will be human contaminated machines. Chief Scientist NASA Langley says leaflet at top of page, having troubles uploading. Okay, I think he was trying to upload a Facebook link. That might be why that was doing that. And thank you for this tip as well, Roger. That one and this one following our proposed laws put forth by the voters. Question 3, changes to alcohol retail licensing initiative. A yes vote supports this ballot initiative to incrementally increase the combined number of retail beer and wine licenses and all alcohol beverage licenses as establishment could own from no more to 12 in 2023 to no more than 18 by 2031. That one should be interesting here. This is a drinking town. Limit the maximum number of licenses for the sale of all alcoholic beverages an establishment could own to 7. Prohibit in-store automated and self-checkout sales of alcohol. Yeah, they really need to do something about that. I never understood why they had that to begin with. Change the formula used to calculate fines by using gross profits on all retail sales rather than the gross profits on the sale of alcohol. And add out-of-state driver's licenses to the list of approved identification. Yeah, so for people who don't know, in Massachusetts, out-of-state driver's license technically is not considered an approved identification at some package stores here. And again, package stores are something what they call liquor stores here. So people have run into this problem before. They come up here to visit people and they're like, they have a New Jersey like license and they're like, we need a state ID or something. It's just weird. It depends on the place that you go to. Under the State Liquor Control Act, question 4, a veto referendum remove proof of citizenship or immigration status for driver's license applications. Referendum A yes vote is to uphold House Bill 4805, which prohibits registrars from inquiring about an applicant's citizenship or immigration status when applying for a driver's license or a motor vehicle registration, and authorizes registrars to accept certain documents to verify the identity and date of birth of the applicant. And there you have it, Sabs. Go get you some direct democracy. And yes, what the hell is transhuman? What? Are you going woke, Sabby? LOL. I figured it'd be an interesting topic. Thank you for this as well. Regarding workers, well, like Jacob E. and Myers, it's about time. So this can be resolved by a few different things. Outlaw private equity from owning not only homes and residential apartments, but hospitals, nursing homes, medical facilities, clinics, etc. Pass a law via BI or state legislator to do it and do the same. Oh, and do same for right of first refusal law that transfers ownership from private equity to the workers. Done. And thanks for this one as well. Or have the state take ownership and operation to transfer ownership to workers later if they want to. Ashura is talking about Mortal Kombat. Come on, Sab. You must have been part of the Street Fighter crowd rather than the MK crowd. Boo. I played both. I played Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, but I thought Ashura was talking about Halloween because it's almost that time. I know it's not October yet, but Halloween's one of my favorite holidays, so I get really pumped and excited for it. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our next story here. We are now moving into the discussion of Kamala Harris's recent interview with Meet the Press. As you can imagine, they got to get this woman to stop doing interviews. They got to get this woman to stop doing interviews. So As you can imagine, I'm just going to get into it. We're going to start at 8:48, where she starts to get into the discussion about Joe Biden. As you can imagine, it's pretty cringe. I'm going to chime in here and there. And I also noticed something else about this interview. Kamala Harris does not look the same. Now, I don't like to do like the personal attacks, calling people like, names or whatever. But I want you to just pay close attention to Kamala Harris. She does not look the same. So let's get started.
I think back to the president's inaugural address, and he said the following: politics need not be a raging fire destroying everything in its path. And then I think about the language construction he used with semi-fascist. And I understand the dilemma. You got to call it out in order to bring the country together. But it's hard to do both at the same time, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing.
So he's referring to the speech that Joe Biden gave recently in Philadelphia. We talked about that here on this show, where he was saying that he was trying to bring the country together, but at the same time, he was attacking a particular group, people who are, call themselves like MAGA. He was attacking that group. And I thought that was a bad idea. How are you going to say you're bringing people together and you're isolating, singling out one particular group? That's not unity, that's division. So I didn't think him making that speech was a good idea. But listen to her response here.
Let's talk about our president for a moment. Joe Biden has spent his entire career, it is on for all to see, working across the aisle. His whole career, sometimes he's been criticized for.
Let's hear this one more time. Let's listen to her here.
In order to bring the country together. But it's hard to do both at the same time, isn't it?
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about our president for a moment. Joe Biden has spent his entire career, it is on for all to see, working across the aisle. His whole career, sometimes he's been criticized.
Let's pause right there for a moment. Sometimes he's been criticized. Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say, Desert Mantis. He should have been criticized. Let's talk about him working across the aisle because, we heard this a lot when he was running for president. Who was he working with when he crossed those aisles? People like to talk about him working across the aisle. He worked across the aisle to work with racist Strom Thurmond. Are we going to talk about that? And not just to have tea or to have a bite to eat, but to write legislation. To write legislation that would criminalize particularly Black men. Let's talk about that. When people bring up Joe Biden working across the aisle, make sure you mention that part. Who was he working with? Let's not forget that. And it's interesting because here comes Kamala Harris. Yes, she's the vice president, so obviously she's going to defend him. But she was also the one during the Democrat debates that went after Joe Biden, basically calling him a segregationist. That little girl was me. Isn't that laughable? She had T-shirts made and ready to go with her face on it. That's why I say American politics is a joke. So she called Joe Biden out for that same type of behavior. And here she is defending him working across the aisle. But we can't work across the aisle. Because, see, according to that speech that Joe Biden gave, see, this is the thing. I'm not supposed to work with my neighbor for worker rights and for class issues if they're MAGA or if they're Republican, period. We're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to put political ideology aside and work with people who are part of the working class or part of people who are poor. We can't do that. But it's okay for these politicians in DC to do it. Remember that.
For believing in bipartisanship, for believing in compromise, for believing in working across the aisle, finding common ground.
Working across the aisle and finding common ground. So she said that, not me. And what common ground, we're going back to the crime bill again, because I will not let this go. What common ground did Joe Biden have with Strom Thurmond in reference to the crime bill? I guess both him and Strom Thurmond wanted to lock up black men. Let that marinate for a minute. Think about that. That's what they had in common.
His whole career has been that. But there are moments in time when we have to also agree, all good people who care about our country, that there are those who right now are vividly not defending our democracy.
This is the talking point that all of them have been using. Kamala, Joe Biden, Rogan, even AOC is doing it as well, not defending our democracy. We don't have a real democracy. I've told you guys about this before. They know that, by the way. If we had a real democracy, third party and independent candidates wouldn't have to fight just to get on the ballot, only to be taken off by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. If we had a real democracy. If we had a real democracy, technically, the popular vote would win, not the Electoral College. If we had a real democracy. But they're using this term because they're trying to resonate, particularly, especially with younger people. They're trying to resonate with people who are liberals, people who, some of us who are independents. They're trying to resonate with those groups of people because they want them to be afraid that, listen, if the Republicans win, we could lose our democracy. Newsflash, for people who are worried about paying their rent next month, for people who are hoping that they don't get an unexpected expense like their car breaks down, for people who are wondering where they're going to get their next meal from, for people going to work Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, crossing their fingers, hoping they're not going to get laid off. Those people are not thinking about your democracy. People who are struggling to make it are not waking up every morning thinking, I wonder about the United States democracy. No, they are thinking about how are they going to pay these bills. Do you think the average single parent who doesn't have childcare, who's working 2 jobs, and their kid basically has to raise theirself, do you think they're thinking about our democracy when they get up and they go to work in the morning? Not at all. Not one bit. You got to pass it on. You got to pass it on. They act like it's the most important thing, and it is not the most important thing.
And I think we want that our commander-in-chief, that the president of the United States, will speak up and raise the alarm about what this means to our strength and our future, much less our integrity.
I'm curious, when you see the Democratic Party and some parts of the party funding ads.
How are you going to talk about integrity? And here you have one of your own calling people and telling them to drop out of the race to help Joe Biden win. How are you going to talk about integrity?
To promote some of these election deniers in primaries, whether it's Michigan, the high-profile race there, Illinois, Colorado, New Hampshire. It looks like a cynical, a little bit cynical. And the president went out of his way to say there are good Republicans here. Should you leave the good Republicans alone in a primary? Is the Democratic Party making a mistake here by those people could win if you're not careful?
I mean, listen, I'm not going to.
You hear the fear mongering? Those people could win if we're not careful. Trump derangement syndrome.
Tell people how to run their campaigns. I ran in terms of statewide office.
Would you have done this?
Would you?
So she just said she's not going to tell people how to run their campaigns. And I 100% agree. She couldn't get a single delegate, you guys. Why is he asking her about how people should run their campaigns?
You have done this. Is this something you'd be comfortable
I'm not
with?
going to tell people how to run their campaigns, Chuck. I ran for a statewide for Attorney General, re-election, won both times, for Senate, won that race. And I know that it is best to let a candidate, along with their advisors, let them make the decision based on what they believe is in the best interest of their state. I'm not going to tell people what to do.
You're not worried that
way.
this reflects poorly on the Democrats?
I think that what we have to focus on is that in 60 days as of this interview, in less than 2 months, we are looking at a midterm election in which so much is on the line. Take, for example.
Once again, she didn't answer the question. She is the queen of not answering the question. I've seen her do this multiple times in interviews. And that's my point. Like, he's asking her a question here, which is, you don't think this is going to hurt the Democrats? Doesn't answer the question. She deflects and moves on to something else.
The issue of choice. The United States Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision just took a constitutional right that had been recognized from the women of America, from the people of America. Well, how does that relate to the midterms? Our president has said he will not let the filibuster get in the way. If the Senate, through a majority vote, votes to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, he will sign it into law. You know what that means? In the midterms, we need to hold on to the Senate and get 2 more. And then we can put into law the protections of Roe v. Wade.
You should be able to work with the ones that you have right now, though. That's the problem, Kamala. This is the problem. Let's go back here just for a second. Right there.
Right. That had been recognized from the women of America, from the people of America. Well, how does that relate to the midterms? Our president has said he will not let the filibuster get in the way. If the Senate, through a majority vote, votes to pass the Women's Health Protection Act, he will sign it into law. You know what that means? In the midterms, we need to hold on to the Senate and get 2 more.
If the Senate passes it, what is the backup plan if they don't? Does anybody ask them this question when they interview them? What is the backup plan? What's plan B? Or plan C? Or D? However many backups you need. What's the backup plan? This is all banking on the Senate passing. That's if they do, but you should be able to pass it with the people you have now. That's the problem. She is the tiebreaker. When has she stepped in when she's had opportunities to do so over legislation? When has she stepped in to break the tie? She's deflected to the Senate parliamentarian. The only reason they're even chasing this right now with Roe v. Wade is because the Supreme Court overturned it, because the Democratic Party allowed this to go on for decades when they could have codified Roe v. Wade into law decades ago. When people say, well, Obama couldn't have done it because Lieberman wasn't going to be for it. Okay, you could have got rid of the filibuster. They didn't do that either. There were multiple opportunities when they could have resolved this. They're in panic mode now because now they kind of need to fix it if they want to keep their seats, if they want to win in the midterms, if they want to win in 2024. They have to do something now. And this goes back to the point I've made before. It's only when you put pressure on them, when you push them. And this time, the pressure did not come from the outside at first. The pressure came from the Supreme Court when they overturned it. They had plenty of time to fix this. It's laughable at best. And that's why I told you I felt like they held this as a card in their back pocket to pull it out when they felt it was most necessary. And that time is right now. If they cared that much about women's rights, why didn't they codify it into law decades ago? No one is answering that question, by the way.
And then we can put into law the protections of Roe v. Wade. Everything is on the line when you think about the millions of women and people in America who care about them, who understand the significance of protecting a woman's right to make decisions about her own body
The
instead
Democrats
of her
get 52
government
Senate seats.
telling her what to do.
52 Senate seats or more. Legislative filibuster gone, or just on this issue?
The president has been clear on this issue and on a very important issue in addition to that important issue, which is voting rights. And the president has been very clear.
Of course, it's going to be about voting rights. But remember, when they say voting rights, they don't mean voting rights to vote for whoever you want. It's not voting rights to vote for any candidate you want to vote for. It's voting rights to vote for a Democrat or Republican. And if it's coming from Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, they're talking about getting you to come out to vote for the Democratic Party. It's not voting rights for you to vote third party. It's not voting rights for you to vote for independent candidates. It's not. It's to keep you in the same corrupt, decrepit system that exists and has existed for decades and really has not helped any of us.
He will sign into law and not let the filibuster get in the way, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. Because what is happening in our country, in states around our country, including this very state, they are passing laws making it more difficult for people to vote.
That has been going on for a long time, Kamala. That didn't start this year. People have been complaining about this for years. You want to talk about voting rights? How about you mention the fact that you have both the Republican Party and the Democrat Party gerrymandering districts? Both of them do that. We want to talk about voting rights.
And so our president has said we need to have protections to make sure that every American, whoever they vote for, has the unobstructed ability to do that when it is otherwise their right. So,
but the laws that we have right now aren't even in place for us to do that. The laws that we have right now aren't even in place for people to vote for the people they want to vote for. Like she just said, whoever they want to vote for. It's not whoever. It's not whoever, Kamala. It's the people running as a Democrat or the people running as a Republican. Let's be real.
Everything is on the line in these elections in just less than 2 months.
When you were a senator, you weren't ready to get rid of the legislative filibuster as of 2017. What has changed?
Well, let's talk about what we have seen around the country, in particular after together with Joe Biden, when we won and he became president and I became vice president, which was as a result of some of the highest number of people voting that have ever voted in a presidential election. And then you almost immediately, so-called extremist leaders around the country starting to pass laws making it more difficult for people to vote.
That was already happening, Kamala. Do you guys see the problem here? I'm not saying that didn't happen after they won, but the voting laws, that has been an issue for a while where they were doing that. And I can tell you, when I lived in South Carolina, they were doing this years ago in South Carolina. So this woman, and I told you, she looks different here. I don't know if it's stress. I don't know what it is, but she don't look the same as she did when she ran in 2020.
Because I guess it worried them that people realized, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, but a drop box makes it easier for me to fill out the ballot in the middle of the night and go drop it off instead of standing in line. Hey,
I'm working 2 jobs. Did anyone catch the capitalism issue there? Wait a minute. Do not see. Hold on.
Election.
Here we go.
And then you almost immediately, so-called extremist leaders around the country starting to pass laws making it more difficult for people to vote. Because I guess it worried them that people realized, hey, I'm working 2 jobs, but a drop box makes it easier for me to fill out the ballot in the middle of the night and go drop it off instead of standing in line.
Okay, two problems. She says people are like, hey, I'm working 2 jobs. Problem number 1, people shouldn't have to work 2 jobs in this country. She glosses over that. People should not have to work 2 jobs in this country. Period. Second, she makes it seem like the most next important thing for that person working those 2 jobs is that they needed to vote. And the reality of the situation is this: the majority of Americans do not vote. Now take that same group and look at people who are working 2 jobs. Most people working 2 jobs are not thinking about voting. How can you even say that and not address the poverty situation in this country when you mention people working 2 jobs? How can you say that and not talk about the problems with workers being exploited in this country? How can you say that and not talk about the fact that people don't have a living wage in this country? How can you mention that, Kamala, and not even bring up the real problem here?
Voting by mail, especially if I have disabilities, the physical disabilities that make it more difficult for me to stand in line for 4 hours, I can vote by mail. And I think that scared some people, that the American people were voting in such large numbers.
Are you comfortable that this could end the legislative filibuster for good? Probably, even if you
No,
only
I'm not.
try to do it
No,
for
I'm
2
not.
issues, that it
No,
won't
I'm
end
not.
up getting rid of it? You think it will be held into place on other issues?
I think that there are that is very likely. Yes.
How much should former President Trump's status as a former president and a potential 2024 candidate, how much should that factor into the decision to charge him?
Well, I wouldn't dare tell the Department of Justice what to do. As a former prosecutor, I will tell you, I am not in the business of telling a prosecutor what to do with their case, because they know best the facts and the evidence as applied to the law. And so
I think she might have had a couple of cocktails before this interview. I'm
not going to tell them what to do. And certainly the president and I in our administration, unlike the previous administration,
Right.
have been very, very careful to make sure that there is no question about any kind of interference in terms of the decisions that the Department of Justice makes.
All right.
In that regard.
But let me try to go to 60,000 feet. What do you say to the argument that it would be too divisive for the country to prosecute a former president?
I think that our country is a country that has gone through different periods of time where the unthinkable has happened, and where there has been a call for justice, and justice has been served. And I think that's potentially going to always be the case in our country, that people are going to demand justice, and they rightly do.
If you thought,
Wait a minute. Maybe I misheard this. Give me just a second here.
And certainly the president and I in our administration, unlike the previous administration,
Right.
have been very, very careful to make sure that there is no question about any kind of interference in terms of the decisions that the Department of Justice makes.
all right.
In that regard.
But let me try to go to 60,000 feet. What do you say to the argument that it would be too divisive for the country to prosecute a former president?
I think that our country is a country that has gone through different periods of time where the unthinkable has happened, and where there has been a call for justice, and justice has been served.
When? What periods of time is she referring to? Who is she referring to? When was that? When did that happen? And when was justice served? Because based on what I've seen in reference to the history of presidents in the United States, a lot of times justice has not been served. They've gotten away with a lot.
And I think that's potentially going to always be the case in our country, that people are going to demand justice, and they rightly do.
Have you thought through the scenarios that you might face on January 6, 2025?
Not at all. No. I mean, well, listen,
This is interesting to me. I've seen them ask this question to Jamal Bowman as well. And he said the same thing. Oh, I'm not thinking about 2024. And I said, you should. If you're a politician currently sitting in DC, you should be thinking about what's happening in 2024. It's not that far away. And then now you have Kamala Harris. She's asked basically the same question. And she's like, no, she's not thinking about it. Oh, okay.
what have I thought about? I have thought about the fact that right now we have an election in less than 2 months. And if we're going to look at timelines, that's one of the most immediate timelines that I'm looking at.
I know, but I mean, have you thought about how you might handle a certification that did not reflect the outcome of the popular vote in the state?
I haven't gotten to that point yet. I have to believe that that the United States Congress and all people who have taken an oath to defend our democracy will ensure and will stand up against anyone who tries to destroy or circumvent the rules and the practices and procedures that we've had in place that have allowed a peaceful transfer of power since the inception of our nation and the founding of our nation. And getting back to the ultimate point, that is what we're talking about when we think about January 6th. We have always had a peaceful transfer of power in our nation, no matter our differences, no matter how bloody-knuckled we've been in campaigns.
Can we say that now?
Well, certainly we were on the verge of having a very different outcome. And the injury was still an injury for which we still are experiencing the wound.
Terrible. Bye, Chuck. I think I'm not going to play the whole thing. Is there one? Oh, wait, I think there's this part.
A bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure, but we also have.
What? This is the part. Hold on. This is the part where they start to talk about immigration. I'm going to play this part because I want you guys to hear this. Remember, when it comes to the border, that was her responsibility. That's what she was assigned to take care of. So listen to this.
I believe government should not be saying no exception for rape or incest. As a prosecutor, former prosecutor who specialized in child sexual assault cases, understanding the violence that occurs against women and children, and then to further subject them to those kind of inhumane conditions. That's what I believe.
Final topic here, since we're here in Texas, I want to ask you about the border. Would you call the border secure?
I think that there is no question that we have to do what the president and I asked Congress to do. Is the first request we made. Pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure. But
the border is secure? Then how are people still coming over, Kamala? Did you? Oh. Okay. I'm not making this up. She just told you the border is secure. Okay. Because based on what I've seen, and by the way, this is coming from Joe Biden's press secretary herself, where she talked about they still haven't filled in. She's like, yeah, basically they're going to add on to Trump's border wall. That hasn't been completed yet. People are still coming across. What do you mean it's secure? How could you blatantly lie? Kids are still in the cages. Did you get the kids out of the cages yet? He better push back on this.
We also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border in that that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
No, 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 no. That is not what he was asking. Okay, I'm with Chuck on this one. One more
broken
time.
Immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border's secure?
We have a secure border in that that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration. But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix.
Then it's not secure. If someone tells you that you're about to have 2 million people cross over, it is not secure. Oh my God. JB said, if Chuck Todd can take you down, you lost the plot, ma'am. Yes. What? Here I am agreeing with Chuck. So you know it's bad. You know it's bad.
Given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years, we also have to put in place a law and a plan for a pathway for citizenship for the millions of people who are here and are prepared to do what is legally required to gain citizenship. We don't have that in place because people are playing politics in a state like this and in Congress. By the way, you want to talk about bipartisanship on an issue?
You're playing politics too. That's your job.
Issue that at one time was a bipartisan issue, both in terms of Republican senators and even presidents.
Right now, one of our inflationary problems is we don't have enough labor, particularly in the service economy.
You're right.
A solution on immigration reform that increased particularly lower wage labor could actually have an impact on lowering inflation. How is that not the motivating force to get something done here?
I do believe that for all reasonable people are motivated and desirous that we would get something done. I think a big part of the problem, though, is that there's been political gamesmanship with this issue. It's suggesting that it's a zero-sum game. If you want to deal with the issue, there are practical solutions, which include creating a pathway to citizenship, fixing a broken immigration system, dealing with the root causes of why people are fleeing their home when most people don't want to leave home. And if they do, it's usually because they're fleeing some harm or they simply can't take care of their basic needs if they stay. There are solutions. And sadly, this has become such a partisan issue instead of something where we work on it together, agreeing that what we're doing is not working as a nation. It's not working.
Look, dude, I got to say this. When it comes to immigration, this has not been resolved. This has been an issue my whole adult life. It's been an issue for a long time. And it didn't matter if we had a Republican president, if we had a Democrat president. This issue in particular, they have not seemed to be able to fix. And it's a problem. And I think Kamala, again, I think she needs to stop doing interviews. Not answering the questions. She just blatantly lied to all of you and said our border is secure. It is not. Let me go to some of the comments here. Shout out to Peter for the super chat. Voluntary self-transhumanism is okay. Ooh, we're going to get into that. Greg Bruce says, I bet everyone who's watched Black Mirror voted no on the poll. That's right. Guys, do me a favor. Hit that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. That helps me out with the algorithm. And yeah, I think you're right in reference to the poll. I think most people say no. Shout out to Jay, the informant, for the super chat. Biden's been in office longer than some of us alive. That's right. Delthea says Kamala lies so much she has to get someone else to call her dog. That was good. James, Sabs, I'm glad I found you and the gang. Your takes earlier today was sharp many times. You won me over, all of you. Praying for JB. His message touched me in many ways. Thank you so much for that, James. Whoops, skipped one. Thanks for the super chat, Aspen Fallen. Dark times, but Sabby's hair looks like sunshine. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I had to get my highlights touched up. And thank you for the super chat, Gilbert. When people talk about January, I think, what about Bernie? Is he chopped liver and the election wasn't stolen from him twice? Ooh, that's a good one, Gilbert. That's a good one. Thank you for the super chat, Big Cat's Corner. Kamala is out here wilding, Sabby. Let her know. Thank you for that. And thank you for the super chat, Jolly B. Cheers. Thank you so much for that. I'll go ahead. If there's a comment on Rockfin, I'll take that now, Eric, and then I'll move on to the next story. Thank you for this tip on Rockfin, Roger. To protect those rights and copy and create these federal programs and services at state level, the fight is coming to a state and locality near you all. So let's be proactive instead of reactive, like we currently are doing with abortion. Also, Kamala is having a George Bush Jr. moment when he misread that lady saying she has to work 3 jobs. And he said that is uniquely American and congratulated her. I remember that. I remember. Okay, let's get into our next story. So you guys were asking about this transhumanism. Let's go ahead and get into it. So Joe Rogan had a segment recently, and they started talking about transhumanism. And I didn't know a lot about this. And so I was like, well, this sounds interesting. I want to hear about it. Before I show you that clip, I want to tell you about transhumanism first. So then you'll understand what they're talking about in the clip. Now, this is from the website called whatistranshumanism.org. So what is transhumanism? Transhumanism is a way of thinking about the future that is based on the premise that the human species in its current form does not represent the end of our development, but rather a comparatively early phase. Transhumanism is a loosely defined movement that has developed gradually over the past 2 decades. All right, well, let's go around here. Humanity Plus formally defines it based on Max Moore's original definition as follows. The intellectual and cultural movement that affirms the possibility and desirability of fundamentally improving the human condition through applied reason, especially by developing and making widely available technologies to eliminate aging and to greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. The study of ramifications, promises, and potential dangers of technologies that will enable us to overcome fundamental human limitations, and the related study of the ethical matters involved in developing and using such technologies. Transhumanism can be viewed as an extension of humanism, from which it is partially derived. Humanists believe that humans matter, that individuals matter. We might not be perfect, but we can make things better by promoting rational thinking, freedom, tolerance, democracy, and concern for our fellow human beings. Transhumanists agree with this, but also emphasize what we have the potential to become. Just as we use rational means to improve the human condition and the external world, we can also use such means to improve ourselves, the human organism. In doing so, we are not limited to traditional humanistic methods, such as education and cultural development. We can also use technological means that will eventually enable us to move beyond what some would think of as human. Ooh. Now, let's get into this clip here with Joe Rogan, where they discuss just that. And then if you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and click your answer on that poll there. Let's get into it.
when I'm talking about the evolution of the creature becoming godlike, I think it happens with technology. And I think technology gets introduced into the human biology, and it radically accelerates our ability to think and solve problems and come up with new solutions and then invent newer and crazier innovations.
But that's tool using. But that might be.
It's not tool using. It's the fabric of space and time. It's finding out what the fuck dark matter is, harnessing it, creating nuclear fusion in a sustainable way where they never have to worry about ever having any pollutants, have a zero carbon atmosphere.
I'm still asking you, though. I wonder at times to what end is that?
I think we become a thing that's not us. I think we become like a fucking
transhuman or something.
I think that's coming. And I don't think that's going to be that far away. A caterpillar creates a cocoon. It doesn't know it's going to become a butterfly. It doesn't know what the fuck it's doing. It just does it. That's what it does. I think that's what we do. We make better and better shit. And at this point, I think we're at the point in the human animal has evolved from being a caveman to being a person who lives in 2022 who's totally attached to your iPhone. We're real close. We're real close. And you keep following it, it's going to go to a point where those things are going to be inside of us because they improve us. They make everything better. They're going to fix your eyesight. They're going to fix your body. People with spinal cord injuries are going to be able to walk again. And that's going to be the door. And that's going to open it up to people that are going to use it to make more money.
For sure.
Imagine if there's a thing that you could plug into your head and all of a sudden you're 150, 250% smarter than you are. And you have instantaneous access to information on the internet. And you start making financial decisions that are like ridiculous in terms of how effective you are compared to everybody else that's doing it. You figure out how to control. And then only the people that have that technology will be able to compete.
The elite.
That's good. The only if you
That's
get
what's
into
scary.
If the only people that have that technology, it's like there's a window of time when that shit starts getting implemented, where people are gonna feel like, holy fuck, I'm gonna get left out.
Yeah.
Like if people become a different thing,
These are stressing me out.
if people become a different thing, if we become a thing that is connected all the time to the internet, all the time, and your brain works way better than it works now. What if it just cures depression? What if there's no more war?
What's the chip Elon's
What if there's
working
no
on,
more?
right? He's working on that chip?
So that's a clip from that segment. And it's really interesting. I think there's some things said there that we definitely need to dive into, right? Like in reference to intelligence. So one of the things they mentioned on the website was education, like and make it to the point where you know all, you see all, where you don't have to necessarily try hard or try harder to be great at education. What if there was technology created later on that
When
made
I'm talking
it
about
so
the evolution
that
of the creature.
Hey, Joe, I don't know how that happened. He started talking on his own again. Sorry. That made it so that you didn't have to study for a test. You just know it. If you had the technology, you just know it. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, because I feel like if it gets to that point, then what are we striving towards? If we don't have to open a book to learn anything, and if there's technology for us, well, we just automatically know the answer. I'm not sure I would want to do that. Now, at Spyro Ghost, he was the one that shared this clip, and he said Rogan talks about transhumanism. It will be sold to the public as a scientific miracle. And he goes on to say, my concern is it will be treated like every other technological advancement. Instead of helping humanity, it will be weaponized and used against humanity, literally plugging you into the control grid. So Eric had actually mentioned this just a minute ago, actually before we went live. And one of the things that was mentioned was, well, who's controlling it? If we have transhumanism, who's in control? Is the individual in control of what the technology is going to do for them, or does the government control it? And my response to that was, if there's technology involved, I would bank on the government having some type of control over the technology. I mean, just look at what they're doing now. They have some kind of control over YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Like, just look at it, right? But when I saw this clip from Joe Rogan, I immediately thought about one of my favorite shows. If you haven't seen it, you definitely should. Actually, we did a segment about this. And that's a show called Black Mirror. And if you haven't seen this, I can't play any clips on here because you know how it is with copyright. If you have not seen Black Mirror, it's on Netflix. Definitely check it out. And the reason why I reference this is because most of the episodes in Black Mirror are about technology. It's in the future and technology is different. But what you find in a lot of these episodes is that there's pros with the technology, but towards the end, you kind of see, oh, maybe that technology is not good to have after all. And I want to point to a couple to compare. Let me just scoot to the back here, blow it up. So what's cool is you can click on the different seasons here and go to this one. In the first season, there's an episode called The Entire History of You. So listen to what this says here. In the near future, everyone has access to a memory implant that records everything humans do, see, and hear. Now, there's pros and cons about that, right? The pro is like, if you forgot what happened 2 weeks ago, well, you have that implant that's implanted into your eye. You can just rewind back and see, oh yeah, person so-and-so said this. So-and-so told me they were going to do that. But for those of you who have seen that episode, you know there's also a con that comes with that as well, because you might be able to see some things that you don't want to see, right? That's what's good about this show. Now, season 2, see if this is the one with the white bear. That's not the one. The Waldo moment wasn't that good. White Christmas is another one I think that you should look at. That's season 2. And that's the one, 3 interconnected tales of technology run amok during the Christmas season. And it's told by 2 men at the remote outpost in a frozen wilderness. I believe that's the one with John Hamm. You should definitely check out that one. That's another one. And then season 3, I think the one that hits on this the hardest is Nosedive. And with Nosedive, it kind of reminds me of Facebook, Twitter in a sense, but to the point where it affects your life, where anything that you want to get in life, whether it's an apartment, you just want to rent an apartment, or you want to buy a car, there's no such thing as credit per se. So you don't have a credit score, but you do have like an app score. And so basically what you get in life is based off of how many likes you have, how many follows you have on this platform. So as people unfollow you, guess what? You lose things that you own, that you possess. That's right, Jamie. Nosedive was totally about social credit scores. So what happens is what? You end up with a lot of people being fake towards each other because they don't want their likes to decrease. So when I think about something like transhumanism, I would say I would recommend watching Black Mirror. Because again, like I said, a lot of these episodes here have to deal with technology, future technology. I don't want to give too much away if you haven't seen it. That's why I'm trying to be a little bit vague here. USS Callister, that's another one that I think is important to see. Oh, I forgot about Hang the DJ. I'm not going to give too much of these away, but Hang the DJ is another one. But yeah, definitely check out Black Mirror. I think that's the best bet for that. But when you talk about like transhumanism, like, I don't know if I want to know all and see all. And I don't know, like basically like you're trying to, I guess, amplify, you're trying to increase human characteristics or human qualities that we already have to the level where we know more, we can see more, right? But then you're almost more like a machine. And I'm not sure I want that. I'm not sure I want that. Like, I don't know. I like learning, right? So if we were to implement types of technology like that, which people could probably already be working on. I think that would kind of take the fun out of it, in a sense. What's that, Dan? Modification, but I don't want to be connected. That's interesting. So, Eric, let me know when you have the poll, because I want to see what everyone said about transhumanism, because I'm curious. Oh, you guys are talking about Black Mirror. Yeah, Jamie said, like I said earlier, I love the idea of transhumanism where it improves humans as a species. But while there is a profit motive, I will pass on that implant. LOL. That's a good point. They're going to try to make money off of it. Yes, Robert, Boston Dynamics. That's right. I told you there's one here, MIT. Like we have companies here that are already working on that type of technology. So it's just, I don't know. Sebastian says it sounds like eugenics. Yeah, some people have said that too. I don't know. I don't know that I would trust it either. Let's take a look and see what you guys thought. Now, here's that poll. I don't know how to make myself smaller. Oh, there I am. Okay. Here's that poll. Are you in favor of transhumanism? 11% said yes. 64% said no. And 24% said maybe. So that's interesting. That's 441 votes. For those of you who said no, I wonder, like, why did you say no? Is it because of the same reason that I said, that we need to worry about like the control factor, who's controlling it, if we're controlling it? Juliet said, when you dive into the desire to be perfect, it's all shallow. That's a good point as well. Good point. I'm going to go to some of the comments here. Thanks for the super chat, Cool Blue. Kamala Harris, just like the Democratic Party as a whole, is empty. She makes Dan Quayle look good. Ouch. Potato. It was potato he spelled wrong, right? Thank you for the super chat, Rodrigo. Sabby, please destroy liberal talking points on rising. Oh, thank you for that, Rodrigo. Thank you for the super chat. Brent, who is the mastermind that saw this hot mess and said we need to get her on national television? I don't know, man. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. The last Rockfin you read, you skipped to that came before it. Okay, we'll fix that in a second. JB says, but why does it have to be tied to money and capitalism? That's a good point as well. Thank you for the super chat, Delthea. It is in the struggle that we grow and experience life most fully. In a world where there is no struggle, no discovery, no creation, there can be no authentic living. I think that's the piece, right? Like if there's no type of discovery, create, like none of that, then what's the point? I guess I just kind of, I don't know. Thank you for the super chat, Blunts and Otters. When Black Mirror said next season of Black Mirror, you're living it. That's a good point, Blunts and Otters. Oh, look at the cute name. Look at the cute little otter. I have an otter video that I shared on Twitter earlier today. It was so cute. It was two little otters holding hands. All right, I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sab, if you say we had a real democracy, we'd get rid of the electoral college for presidential elections. I would go further and say if we had a real democracy, we would realize Mike Gravel's dream and allow voters to pass, repeal federal laws and amendments the U.S. Constitution via a national ballot initiative and veto reform. Good point. And thank you for this as well. Remember, you heard it from me first, guys, regarding kicking everything to the states. Dobbs was a dry run. Section 1983 of the 1871 Civil Rights Act is making its way up to the SCOTUS. The act that allows people to sue state and local governments for not properly administering and delivering federal funds, resources to intended targets. Once SCOTUS severs ability for us to sue them, we will be forced to fight at the state level. I think that says, yeah. Thank you for this tip, Chris Leon. Sabby, Kamala looks different because she's getting her adrenochrome from the jabbed kids, not the pure adrenochrome like the kind Biden gets. Oh dear. Thank you for the tip, JVB, the $5 tip. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for this tip, Roger, to protect those rights and copy and create these federal programs and services at state level. The fight is coming from a state and locality near you all. So let's be proactive instead of reactive like we currently are doing with abortion. Also, Kamala is having a George Bush Jr. moment when he misread that lady saying she has to work 3 jobs and said it's uniquely American and congratulated her. And thank you for this tip as well. Regarding Cam talking about the border, remember what I told you yesterday about the New York State passed overtime pay law. Part of the issue with migrant workers is that employers use the loose labor law loopholes to get around treating workers fairly. American workers will never take those jobs because they're terrible. That's true. Which is why they'll get to take advantage of them because they know they'll never complain. This reminds me of the X-Files episode when they injected nanites into people, aka microscopic robots, to control them, mostly by causing pain and discomfort or possibly death or internal organs. Also, what happens when someone is able to hack into them from afar, they can control you. Thank you for that. And thank you for this tip, Jacob. We'll hack your brain. We will be God. Science is about world power, not facts. Useless class. We don't need humans, at least not too many. These are all Yuval Noah Harari quotes. Obama gets Natalie Portman. Janelle Monáe praises him. Interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our final story tonight. Now, this is about Sam Seder and Tulsi Gabbard. So this is an interesting discussion. They're talking about the IRS here, and apparently Sam Seder is not fond of, I guess, some of the talking points that Tulsi Gabbard has recently about the IRS. So let's go ahead and get into that.
About how the IRS is really just a bunch of government agents. This has been the longest right-wing talking point that exists. Now, we do know certain things about the IRS. We know that as particularly the Republican Party, less so the Democratic Party, although there's probably been some instances where the Democrats have shortchanged the IRS. The more the IRS was defunded, the more they turned their enforcement apparatus to lower income people. Why? Because lower income people were suddenly became the low hanging fruit. Instead of going for the biggest apple, they went for the ones that were easiest to pick because they didn't have, just to extend this horrible metaphor, they didn't have the money to buy ladders to go up and pick the big apples.
When did they ever really go after the big apples to begin with? Because, and I ask this question because I know there's certain celebrities from the past where the IRS did go after them, right? So Sammy Davis Jr., IRS went after him. But when have they been consistently good on that issue before funding changed? And I ask that because if they were consistent on that issue about going after the millionaires and the billionaires per se, then why haven't they been able to catch people who have offshore accounts? Why haven't they been able to catch people who have these loopholes that they've created so that they can get around paying the amount of taxes they're supposed to pay? And that's usually wealthy people who are doing that. So if they were so great on this issue, if the IRS was so great on this, then why haven't they nailed all these people?
So they just stayed on the ground and picked the low-hanging, smaller apples. That's what happened. That's a fact. You can see the graph for funding the IRS goes down like this. And the graph for auditing lower income people goes like this.
But when were they going after wealthy people to begin? That's the question that I have. When were they going after wealthy people to begin with? And in reference to Sammy Davis Jr., that was after Sammy Davis Jr. passed away. That's usually when they would come after some of the celebrities after they had passed away. Then they're like, okay, we got to come and seize all your stuff because you weren't paying taxes, usually. So when were they consistent on doing this before they were defunded? That's the question that I have.
And so the Democrats passed a bill in this most recent legislation that would increase funding for the IRS, much of which was to add 80,000 inspectors, although not all at one time. It's to replace a lot of people who are about to retire. So maintain, maybe slightly increase the number of agents who are going to be working, all good. The better the resources the IRS has, and understanding the scoring of their bills was to get more money out of the IRS. And the places where you're going to increase the revenue that comes in, it's the Internal Revenue Service, is going to be from wealthy people. But
are they going to go after wealthy people, though? Are they going to go after people like Jeff Bezos? Are they going to go after people like Elon Musk? Are they going to go after people like Bill Gates? Are they going to go after those types of people who have avoided paying what they're supposed to pay in taxes? We're talking for decades here. Are they going to go after those people? I don't think they are. That's the problem, Sam. So you're going to give the IRS more money. Which is going to be easier for them to go after? Is it going to be easier for them to go after working class and poor people? Or is it going to be easier for them to go after millionaires and billionaires? I bet it's easier for them to go after working class and poor people. Billionaires, especially millionaires, they have a way of moving their money around to make it more difficult for the IRS to find. Again, perfect example, offshore accounts, tax loopholes.
Wingers will say stuff like this. I give you a host of, the fill-in host for Tucker Carlson, but Fox News guest, what's her name? Tulsi Gabbard.
You look. So now he tries to pretend like he doesn't know Tulsi Gabbard's name. See, I have criticisms of Tulsi Gabbard. I don't like where she's been on the issues as of recent. Actually, starting back with last year, I noticed she's changed her position on things. So I don't feel her on some of the issues. But I thought that was pretty cruddy for him to pretend like all of a sudden now he doesn't know her name. Come on.
Look at those numbers that you broke out and the messaging that's coming out of the Democrats in Congress saying, hey, this will only apply to the wealthy. We're only taxing the wealthy. Well, that's only 1% to 2% of all taxpayers. So why in the world do they need $80 billion and 87,000 new hires in order to go after 1% to 2%?
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second.
Well, that's a legitimate question. I think that is a valid question. Why do you need all of those extra agents just to go after that small percentage of the population if they are targeting that percentage of the population? And that's the question. 9 times out of 10, they're going to target what's easier for them to target. And that's going to be poor and working class people and even middle class people. So I actually thought that was a valid point.
First of all, again, those 87,000 new hires are going to be over the next 10 years. For those of you who watch Fox on a regular basis, that comes out to about 8,700 new employees every year, of course.
But why do you need that? Why do you need Never mind. I'll let him go on.
It's not all these people are auditors. There's a lot of other services that go on. It's going to make your paying your taxes that much easier and getting your refunds quicker. But it's also going to be adding auditors to go after that 1 to 2% of all taxpayers who have all the money now. And then they have oceans of lawyers to prevent the IRS from finding the fact that they're not paying any taxes. That's where it's coming from. That's where, and she knows all this.
Do you know what? Like, first of all, like, it's only.
But how, I guess the question I have is, how are those new agents that they add, that 8,700, whatever he just said per year, how are they going to now go around the team of lawyers that wealthy people have? Do you see what I'm saying?
One to 2% of all taxpayers, like, that's still like millions of people.
Yes. I mean, it's millions of people and the wealthiest of people.
Yeah, with the best lawyers.
Right. So if you know that they have the best lawyers, how is the IRS still going to be able to get around that? That's the question.
Taxpayer. So why in the world do they need $80 billion and 87,000 new hires in order to go after 1 to 2% of taxpayers? Their math absolutely does not add up, which should be frightening and concerning, because this means exactly what you said. They're coming after us. They're coming after entrepreneurs. They're coming after small business owners. They're coming after our middle-class, hardworking Americans. There's no question about that. And then you layer on top of that what you just mentioned, their criminal division with the power of enforcement of a gun, essentially, and how we have already seen, it's not a theory that the IRS has also, like many of these other federal agencies, abused their power to go after political opponents. We have seen them do this with Lois Lerner under the Obama administration. There were no consequences there, and she was directly targeting blatantly conservative organizations. And so this dangerous trend that we are seeing that happened gradually over years, but everything from the IRS to Department of Homeland Security, their counterterrorism division, the FBI, the Department of Justice, we are seeing how they are more blatantly in broad daylight being weaponized to target political opponents of those in power and anyone who dares to dissent or question or challenge their actions and policies. This is government bureaucracy at its worst, rather than actually identifying the problem.
God, I mean, this is really like, I don't know how many times we can play a Tulsi Gabbard clip and be like, wow, she really is now a total right winger. First off, her problem with the with tax.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you a little story here. I was audited. Never talked about that on the show before. I was audited by the IRS when I was in grad school. This is the funny part. I was in grad school. Didn't have a full-time job. I was in grad school. So I had a part-time job. Do you know they audited me over $150? They were questioning $150. So if I just told you I was working part-time and I was in grad school, you can kind of figure out in your mind how much you think I was making roughly. Wasn't much. They came after me instead of coming after people who are like millionaires and billionaires who have loads of money, not paying what they're supposed to pay in taxes. People who have these offshore accounts. They came after little old me. It was ridiculous. I couldn't believe it happened. So after I gave them all the paperwork that they needed about that $150, I was all set. The point that I'm trying to make is they should have never came after me at all. You get the point? Why are you coming after a student? You can take his pick off now, please. You can take his pick off now, please. Yeah, you don't like my music. This may not be the channel for you. I've seen a lot of your comments. I think you're expecting to hear something you're going to hear on TYT or Majority Report here. This is not the one. I think if you want to hear something that's more mainstream, you should go watch those networks and not this one. And no, it's not about holding a grudge. It's about proving a point that they chose to come after someone who was working class instead of coming after the big fish that they should really be frying. That's the point. Take that however you want. So let's go back in here.
This is like, I've had the libertarian candidate for president or, trying to win the primary. That guy, Darryl Perry, was most famously the one who hung up on me over that. But every libertarian who calls in talks about the monopoly of force and forcing me to pay my taxes at the barrel of a gun.
Right.
At the barrel of a gun. And then you want to talk about politicization. We know. We have evidence, testimony, eyewitnesses who talk about the politicization of the Department of Justice under the Bush administration. Talking about weaponizing and going after your political enemies under the Bush administration. The controversial firing of the U.S. attorneys who would not find fake stories of voter fraud, would not go after local politicians, fired because they didn't come up with enough. There's a book that just came out. We'll talk about it tomorrow about the Trump doing this with the Department of Justice. The Lois Lerner story is a joke. Yeah. It's a joke. It's a joke. That's Benghazi level stuff. Worse than Benghazi, actually. There were a bunch of so-called 503Cs, I think it was, that conservatives were running that were arguing they weren't political at all, which is just absurd. Any type of enforcement from the IRS, you hear right-wingers scream. That's how you know they're really right-wingers.
Really? So only people on the right criticize the IRS? Really? I beg to differ. I beg to differ. Because I know that if you talk to people, some people in working class neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods that are not on the right, they have criticisms of the IRS too. You guys know how I feel about the alphabet letter groups. You know how I feel about these alphabet groups. We're going to
It's like literally like a litmus test.
It used to be, I guess. There's a certain type of anti-elitist who is also apparently saying that this is authoritarianism. You enforce taxes. That's authoritarianism.
Yeah, folks. Taxation is, you want to get taxation basically means one of two things to people. It really should mean both. One is you're taxing so that your government can spend things. I don't necessarily think that it's necessary for that, but certainly a lot of people do. And so when they talk about demonizing the IRS, what they're talking about is we don't want to provide government to provide support to people.
Is the government providing support to people in poor and working class neighborhoods with our taxes? Is that what they're using our tax dollars for? Because I beg to differ. Every year it's something different. They tell us your tax dollars are going to fix the roads. Really? Then why aren't they fixed? Your tax dollars are going towards helping the education system, helping the neighborhood. Really? Why are the schools still underfunded? Our taxes increase. Look, I live in Massachusetts. We call it Taxachusetts for a reason. I live in Massachusetts. Our taxes, they increase. But I don't see, that's what I'm saying. What are they using the money for? Because I don't see other things increasing around me. The state is in charge of public transportation here in reference to the MBTA. They're in charge of that. They're not in charge of the commuter rail. That was privatized, but there's this whole other thing going on with that. But the state is in charge of the MBTA here. We can't even get that to work right. So I know they're not using our tax dollars towards that. They just shut down 2 lines. So we've had problems with that for a long time. So where exactly are these tax dollars going? That's the question.
The other is there is one mechanism that is better than any other mechanism if you want to deal with income inequality. If you want to get rid of an oligarchy and you are honest about that, the first mechanism that you should turn to is taxation. Confiscatory taxation, wealth taxes, making sure that wage taxes and taxes on making money from money have parity. That's the way you do it.
Let's talk about that for just a second, because that was one of the things that Elizabeth Warren wanted to do. She wanted to have a wealth tax, right? And I believe that that would work. Then it was brought to my attention, what happens if those wealthy people who were charged that wealth tax, what happens if they just leave? What happens if Jeff Bezos says, you know what, I don't want to pay a wealth tax, so I'm going to move to Europe? What happens? And I never thought about that. So I don't know. I don't really know if we can depend on that, right? I'm not sure if we can depend on it. Because rich people can always move. They can always leave. They can just pick up and go when they feel like it. Most of us can't do that. Moving costs money. So this is something to think about. It's something to think about. But oh my God, the alphabet groups, I just can't. I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's different for me. I know people that have definitely been done wrong by the IRS. And those are people who are working class, and those are people who are poor. I'll take that comment here. Oh, shout out to Jollibee, who's a member for 3 months. Whoop, whoop. Could you please have Hakeem on as a guest sometime? This guy is so on point. I'd have to check that out. Oh, it doesn't let you guys send links in the... It doesn't let you guys send links in the chat. Yeah, unfortunately, that's a thing. But I'll remember that, or I'll have to screenshot that. But those are things to think about. I don't know. Thank you for the super chat, Michael Pino. God is knowledge. Lady Alex says the laws were made for the rich. Right. That's why I'm like, they're not made for us, for poor people or for working class people. JB says, but another issue they don't talk about, the wealthy don't really have to worry because they have lawyers who exploit loopholes that are legal, so the IRS don't come after them. That's what I'm saying. And this is what I was saying in reference to what Sam Seder was talking about. How do you know they're going to target the wealthy people? It's harder to target them. It's harder to go after them. Thank you for the super chat, Foe, Wesley Snipes, Ronald Isley, Sammy Davis Jr. They have no problem going after, I think you mean wealthy Black people. That's true. That is true. Thank you for the super chat, Miss. Watch Outside the Wire. It's scary how much that's supposed to be the future and coincides events happening now. I'll have to check that out. Thanks for the super chat, Rosie. If they're looking into transactions of 600, then who does he think they're intending to go after? Right. Think about it. They're going to come after us. That's the problem. Greg Bruce says, we're being Sam-splained. Thank you for the super chat, Michael. Amen, sister. God bless. Thank you so much for that. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip, Jacob. Human species will split into 2 Harari days on 60 Minutes. Oh, wow. And thank you for this tip as well. Harari saying COVID usher in new regime of surveillance under the skin. Really? Jason Burmas of Loose Change can explain much more. He was on Democracy Now! I'll have to check that out. And thank you for this tip as well. Okay, sorry for typos. Getting war victims out of wheelchairs is great, but the Neuralink is the dictator's dream. 1984 said you had your thoughts at least. No one can infiltrate them. CEO of Nokia at the WEF says next phone implanted in US. Schwab boasts of penetrating cabinets of Canada, Argentina, Germany, and Putin. He claims now Putin not welcome at WEF. Zelensky abolish unions. Interesting. And thank you for those tips, for those links as well. I have to check that out. And thank you for this tip, Roger Meadows. During the Eisenhower administration, when it came to 501c4, it's the one that said to organizations that are exclusively engaged in social welfare get tax exemption. That's what the law says. But in the Ike admin, the IRS took it upon themselves to change the mismatching the law. And they changed exclusively to primarily, with no gauge to measure how much is primarily big super PAC. Loophole exploiting sense. Wow. And thanks for this tip as well. Kaboob said that the Fed don't need to tax to pay for things. Only state and local have to use taxes. But even with that, they can commission public banks to create the money needed from the taxes already in existence to create the surplus needed. Also, a GOP senator tried to introduce an amendment to make sure that this is specifically targeted to the rich, and the Dems rejected it. Well. See what I was saying? Hit that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so, guys. Shout out to Aberdeen71. Thank you so much for the super sticker. And shout out to Michael Pino. Thank you for the super chat. The government can always change the money if they leave. It's a good point. Lots of things discussed tonight, you guys. All right, guys, tomorrow is Wednesday. You know how that is. I will not be here. I'll upload clips. But someone let the cat out the bag earlier on the show. I will be on Rising tomorrow. I believe it's being recorded. So yes, I believe that's being recorded. So I know that I'm supposed to be on there at 10:15, but I think it's being taped. And then at some point that segment will post. So I'll let you know when that posts. So thank you so much, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. It's been a great Tuesday. Go chill on Wednesday, guys. And as usual, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.